Hello. After 18 months of mostly online shows, Paris Fashion Week is back with models, designers, celebrities and fashionistas flocking to in-person shows. To tell us more, I'm joined by fashion writer Alice Pfeiffer. Hello, Alice.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Now, even though a lot of shows are still virtual, the post-pandemic era of fashion has kicked off with some epic shows, hasn't it?
Yes, we've already seen Dior, we've seen Balmain and its 10th anniversary, we've seen Saint Laurent under the Eiffel Tower, and now we're just waiting for Chanel.
Now, there's been a radical change at one of France's oldest brands as well, hasn't there? Dior.
Dior, yes, Maria Grazia Curie turned away from the 50s that Dior was known from and the Nouveau Look and the Veste Bar for something much more 60s and 70s, which echoed her own quest for feminism, because she celebrated a time in France where women finally in the 60s had access to the contraceptive pill, had access to abortion by showing miniskirts and then the sexuality that might come with it.
Well, the creative director, Maria Grazia Curie, said the miniskirt, suits, short tunics and shift dresses were about starting again. Take a listen.
I think after these 2 years, we can start again during the Fashion Week in Paris without to reflect about the rules of fashion today. Fashion is a game where we play with the clothes, where the people need because they want to express themselves in the world in different way. It's a performing art, fashion.
That was the creative director of Dior. Now, Dior's miniskirts are part of this trend of super sexiness that we're seeing on the catwalks.
Absolutely. It was exactly what Miuccia Prada set herself out to do during Prada with, again, lots of miniskirts. And then Ottinger also did something that looked more like swimwear and underwear than regular fashion. But I think, again, it comes at a time where we've had the whole debate about the Vestiaire Républicain in France and their ban of crop tops. So it's a way of saying that sexy can be completely feminist and can be a sign of liberation rather than just, submitting yourself to the male gaze. So I think it's very important. I think it's a very engagé form of sexiness today that we're seeing.
Well, one show that had an amazing backdrop was Saint Laurent's runway show here in Paris. That brand is part of the group Kering, which has recently totally banned animal fur.
What's interesting about Kering is that they've always known that there was a protest against their use of animal furs, but they've always managed to brush it under the carpet until Instagram took itself to protest against it and saw the rise of Insta protesters, which impacted millennial buyers who care very much about the planet and animal rights. So today, if they want to continue selling, it'll be without animals.
And crop tops have actually recently been banned in schools here in France, haven't they?
Yes, which we're seeing all over the runway again, but apparently it's indecent, said Macron. And I think it's an interesting backlash of Me Too culture is it a way of protecting women? I'm not sure. Shouldn't men be doing the work rather than women? But it's interesting to see that now crop tops, under boob cleavage, as we say, all form of cleavages and bellies, like in Courrèges, are all over the runways.
We're on in Paris at the moment as well are two fashion exhibitions that are not to miss. One is on the French-Canadian designer Thierry Mugler, who was for many years the darling of the fashion industry thanks to his avant-garde creations. It's on at Paris's Musée des Arts Décoratifs. Here's the curator.
Thierry
Mugler's world is really a magical one. It goes beyond fashion. I'm not talking about costume design or prêt-à-porter. These are really unique pieces that have pushed the boundaries of what is haute couture design.
Alice, tell us more about this iconic designer, Thierry Mugler.
Thierry Mugler was known in the 80s and 90s especially to make sort of cyborg bodies, women who turned into cars, who turned into insects, who played with gender and the borders of human and machine always, which is interesting when we see that the Palme d'Or was won by the film Titane, which is about a woman who's merged with a car and who has a car child, actually. So, yeah, again, I think it talks of the limits between man and machine, again, at a time where our machines and our phones are more deeply embedded in our own lives. Google just released Google Jacquard, which is a fiber that's half a computer, half a jacket.
Okay, so how does it work?
Well, I think it counts based on Bluetooth and based on your heartbeats. It counts the amount of steps you've taken, how much you've eaten, where you're going, the phone that it's taking, but it also informs you on the weather if your mother is calling.
Fabulous. Well, another exhibition that's celebrating Vogue, Paris's 100th birthday. The Palais Galliera Museum traces the history of the magazine. What's fascinating to see is the evolution of the covers, from beautiful hand-painted illustrations to photography. Now, Alice, there are 9 days of shows during Paris Fashion Week. Just wanted to know, what's your favourite so far?
So far, I think I love Charles de Vilmorin's first show as head designer for Rochas, where he's brought something that was much needed after the confinement, which is a sense of partying. It's very baroque. There's a sense of camp. It's a little bit sexy. But I think it's people's desire to go out, not go out hidden, not hide, and be flamboyant and wonderful and do it in a way that's queer in its own way.
And another collection that looked utterly fascinating was South African designer Tebi Magugu, whose inspiration was old family photographs. Now, he has an extraordinary talent for telling stories that honour people through his clothes, and his collection shows us how he became who he is. Have a listen.
This season I wanted to do something very optimistic because I've been feeling very bogged down. I wanted to turn inwards into a more sort of positive state of mind, and whenever I do that I always think of my family. It was quite an interesting project because my family and I, my mom and my aunt, we came together and went through a box of old family photos. And it was so interesting to see them relive, those memories. And I wanted each family photograph to be represented in the collection.
So, Alice, what did you make of his collection?
I think it's interesting how he merges something non-Western with a real vision of haute couture today and craft, and everything from like the clothing to the appearance and the way it's made is multicultural, which is much needed in France. I mean, today we only have one black designer, who's Olivier Rousteing, and it's interesting to see that couture can be redefined by looking elsewhere than just Paris.
Okay, well, just before we go, Alice, you've got a new book out.
Yes.
Tell me how you would translate the title.
I think it's the taste for bad taste. Moche isn't exactly laid, which is classically ugly. Laid is something terrible, and beautiful is something wonderful. Moche is something endearing but bad looking. And I think it comes from having lived both in London and Paris. Paris, where everything is good taste. London, where everything can be terrible, but it's seen as cool. And to see the thin line where something of bad taste always walks. It's potentially cool, it's potentially terrible, and it's somewhere in between the two.
Okay, well, I want to know some of the examples from the book, because you collect these moche things, don't you?
Yes, for years. There's le sexy, which is something frowned upon in France, which was me wearing petit crop tops and thongs with le lapin Playboy on them. And
Playboy rabbit.
And then the Playboy rabbit. And then there was kitsch, which was my grandmother, my Hungarian grandmother, who had le Louvre à domicile, Louvre at home, what she called it. And she had mini statues of all the big monuments in Paris. And then there's le raté, the failure, where you've tried, but it's a catastrophe, what they call fashion police and fashion magazines. So I think it's one moche for every era of life.
And what about Crocs, for example? I was reading that Have you got Crocs?
5 pairs, all different animal prints, all in plastic.
And you wear them?
Yes, always. And I've added little diamonds to them.
Okay, Alice Pfeiffer, thank you so much for joining us. Your book, Le Goût de Moche, is out now in French. We're going to end with images from the Balmain show. Now, Naomi Campbell and Carla Bruni were on the catwalk. It looked absolutely fabulous, was it? You were there. 2
runway shows side by side. And I think it's wonderful to see how, in a period of austerity, Balmain is completely comfortable with being extremely bling, extremely sexy, and it's everything that's slightly forbidden and shunned upon in France. So, no, it's always good news when Olivier Rousteing's around.
Okay, thank you very much. Remember our website, we're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.